The morning air on Station Helix carried the metallic taste of recycled atmosphere and broken dreams. Zara pressed her twins closer to her sides as the endless line shuffled forward, each step bringing them closer to the immigration compliance office. Her violet skin glistened with nervous perspiration, and her elongated fingers trembled as she adjusted the travel documents tucked inside her worn jacket. Nix, her daughter, clutched a small crystalline toy that hummed with soft melodies. The 8-year-old's silver eyes darted between the imposing government building and her mother's face, searching for reassurance that everything would be okay. Beside her, Echo bounced on his toes, his energy barely contained despite the gravity of their situation. The boy's curiosity about the bustling station had kept him distracted, but Zara knew that innocence wouldn't last much longer. "Mama, why do we have to wait so long?" Nix whispered, her voice carrying the musical quality common among their species, the Valdari. Zara knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with her children. "Because sometimes, little star, the universe tests our patience before it gives us what we need." She touched Nix's cheek gently. "But we stay together, always." The line moved again, and Zara noticed the human standing several meters ahead. He was tall, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that looked like it had been styled by zero gravity. His coveralls bore the insignia of the engineering corps, and he kept glancing back at families in the queue with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was something about his eyes, a warmth that seemed out of place in this sterile environment. Captain Jackson Reed had been waiting for his own appointment, a routine renewal of his civilian contractor license. But watching the Faldari mother with her children had stirred something in his chest he hadn't felt in years. The protective way she held them, the fear she tried to hide behind forced smiles. It reminded him of his own mother when they'd fled the colony wars. The enforcement officers appeared without warning, their black uniforms cutting through the crowd like shadows. They moved with mechanical precision, scanning identification chips and checking registration statuses. Zara's heart hammered against her ribs as they approached. "Faldar, female, designation 4-7 Alpha," the lead officer announced, his voice filtered through a translation device. "Present documentation for compliance review." Zara's hands shook as she handed over their papers. The officer's scanner beeped ominously, and she watched his expression shift from boredom to stern authority. "Incomplete registration. Hybrid offspring require additional processing." "But they're my children," Zara protested, her accent thickening with emotion. "I've submitted all required forms. Hybrid genetic combinations require specialized evaluation. The minors will be transferred to the juvenile assessment facility pending review." The words hit Zara like a physical blow. She stepped back, pulling Nix and Echo behind her. "No, you cannot separate us." "Compliance is mandatory," the second officer stated, reaching for Nix's arm. That's when Jackson moved. "The human intervention hold on there," Jackson said, stepping out of line and positioning himself between the officers and the family. His voice carried the easy confidence of someone used to diffusing tense situations. "What's the legal basis for this separation?" Lead officer turned his scanner toward Jackson. "Human male. This does not concern you. Return to your position." "Actually, it does concern me," Jackson replied, crossing his arms. "See, I'm a licensed engineer with citizenship rights. I'm witnessing what appears to be a violation of the Galactic Family Protection Act." Zara stared at this stranger who had just inserted himself into her nightmare. His presence was commanding, but not threatening. She could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he was buying her time to think. "The act does not apply to incomplete registrations," the officer insisted. "Doesn't it?" Jackson pulled out his personal datapad, scrolling through legal documents with the practiced ease of someone who had argued with bureaucracy before. According to Section 1-B, any separation of minors from their primary guardian requires a formal hearing with legal representation present. Officer's scanner beeped again, processing Jackson's credentials. "You are not authorized legal counsel." "No. But I am a citizen with the right to witness and document potential rights violations." Jackson activated his pad's recording function. "And I'm pretty sure forcibly separating children from their mother without due process is going to make for some very interesting viewing on the intergalactic news network." The standoff stretched for several tense moments. Zara used the distraction to whisper urgently to her children in their native language, telling them to be brave, to remember that they were loved. The twins pressed closer to her, understanding that something terrible was happening. "This is your final warning," the lead officer announced. "Interfere again, and you will be detained." Jackson looked at Zara, and in that moment, something passed. Between them, recognition perhaps, or simply the acknowledgement that sometimes doing the right thing required risk. He gave her the slightest nod before turning back to the officers. "Then I guess you better make room in your detention facility," he said, "because I'm not moving." The officer reached for his enforcement tool, but Jackson was faster. He grabbed Zara's hand and shouted, "Run!" The chase through Helix Station, the family bolted through the crowd. Jackson's hand warm and steady in Zara's as he led them away from the compliance office. Behind them, shouts erupted as the officers called for backup. The station's alarm system activated, filling the air with harsh warning tones. "This way," Jackson called, pulling them toward a maintenance corridor. His knowledge of the station's layout was clearly extensive. He navigated the maze of service tunnels with practiced efficiency. Zara's lungs burned as she ran, carrying Echo when his shorter legs couldn't keep up. Nyx stayed close, her musical humming replaced by frightened breathing. The crystalline toy in her hand pulsed with agitated light, responding to her emotional state. "Why are you helping us?" Zara gasped as they paused in a junction between corridors. Jackson checked his scanner for pursuit signals before answering. "Because nobody should have their family torn apart by bureaucratic nonsense." He looked at her directly, and she saw something deeper in his eyes. "Because you remind me of someone I couldn't help once." They could hear the officers searching nearby passages. Jackson made a quick decision and led them deeper into the station's infrastructure. The walls here were lined with power conduits and atmospheric processors humming with the constant work of keeping the station habitable. "Can we trust him, Mama?" Nyx whispered in Faldari. Zara studied Jackson's face as he worked to open an access panel.
Ow.
There was something about him that felt safe, solid, in a way that had nothing to do with his physical presence. "I think so little. Star. I think he might be exactly what we need." The access panel slid open, revealing a narrow crawl space that led to the station's outer ring. "It's tight, but it'll get us to the civilian quarters without going through the main corridors," Jackson explained. As they squeezed through the passage, Zara found herself acutely aware of Jackson's presence. The way he moved with careful strength, always making sure she and the children were safe. The gentle way he spoke to Nyx and Echo, treating them like individuals rather than problems to be solved. They emerged in a quiet residential section, and Jackson led them to a small apartment. "My temporary quarters," he explained, palming the entry sensor. "Not much, but it's secure." The apartment was spartanly furnished but clean, with engineering manuals scattered across a small table and a half-assembled piece of equipment in the corner. It smelled like machine oil and something else, something warm and distinctly human. "We can't stay here long," Jackson said, activating privacy screens on the windows. "They'll track my biometrics eventually." Zara settled the children on the small couch, noting how they gravitated toward each other for comfort. The reality of their situation was starting to sink in. They were fugitives now on a station where she had no allies and no resources. "I've made you a criminal," she said quietly. Watching Jackson as he prepared basic rations for the children, he paused in his work, turning to face her. "I made myself a criminal the moment I decided that some things are more important than following orders." The way he said it, with such simple conviction, made something flutter in Zara's chest. She'd spent so long fighting alone, protecting her children with nothing but determination and hope. Having someone stand with her felt like a gift she didn't. "Deserve what happens now?" she asked. Jackson's expression grew serious. "Now we figure out how to get you and your kids somewhere safe. And I think I know someone who might be able to help." The weight of connection as the station's artificial night cycle dimmed the lights. Zara found herself watching Jackson work at his communication console. His fingers moved with practiced precision over the controls, and she could see the concentration in his expression. There was something deeply attractive about competence, about the way he approached problems with calm, methodical thinking. "You don't have to do this," she said softly, not wanting to wake the children who had finally fallen asleep. Yes, I do, he replied without looking up. Those kids deserve better than being processed through the system like cargo. And their mother? The question slipped out before she could stop it, more vulnerable than she'd intended. Jackson stopped working and turned to face her. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. Their mother is brave, beautiful, and stronger than she knows. She deserves better too. The compliment hit her like a physical touch. It had been so long since anyone had seen her as more than just a single parent struggling to survive. Jackson's eyes held appreciation not just for her appearance, but for her spirit, her determination. I'm not beautiful, she said, unconsciously touching her violet skin. Not by human standards.
Dad.
Human standards are overrated, Jackson replied, moving closer. You're beautiful by any standards that matter. The air between them seemed to thicken. With possibility, Zara felt a warmth spreading through her chest. A longing she'd thought buried beneath years of survival and responsibility. When was the last time someone had looked at her with desire instead of suspicion? Jackson, she whispered, unsure of what she wanted to say. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed against her cheek. Her skin was softer than he'd expected, warm despite its unusual color. I know this is complicated, he said quietly, but I can't pretend I don't feel this. Zara leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. Feel what? Like I've been waiting for you without knowing it? The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and want. But before either could act on the growing tension, Echo stirred on the couch, mumbling in his sleep. The spell broke, and they stepped apart, both breathing a little harder. We should get some rest, Jackson said, though his eyes lingered on her face. Tomorrow's going to be dangerous. Zara nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet, he replied with a slight smile. Wait until I actually get you out of this mess. As they settled into an uneasy rest, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that Jackson read was going to change her life in ways that had nothing to do with escape and everything to do with the heart. She'd thought too damaged to love again. The station hummed around them, carrying them toward an uncertain future. But for the first time in years, Zara felt something that might have been hope. Dawn on station. Helix came with the artificial lighting slowly brightening to simulate planetary sunrise. Zara woke to find Jackson already awake, quietly speaking into his communication device. His voice was low and urgent, and she caught fragments about safe passage and no questions asked. The children were still sleeping, Nyx curled protectively around Echo, her breathing synchronized in the way of twins who had shared everything since birth. Zara's heart ached watching them, knowing that yesterday's terror would mark them forever. Any luck? She whispered, joining Jackson at the small kitchenette where he was preparing morning rations. Maybe, he replied, handing her a steaming cup of synthetic coffee. I reached out to someone who owes me a favor. She's unconventional, but she might be our best shot. Before Zara could ask what he meant, the apartment's entry chime sounded twice, then once, then 3 times in rapid succession. Jackson moved to the door. Checking the security scanner before opening it, the woman who entered moved like liquid mercury, all curves and dangerous grace. Her auburn hair was cut in an asymmetrical style that somehow looked both practical and seductive, and her clothing was an artful combination of functionality and style. She wore a fitted flight jacket over form-hugging pants, with boots that suggested she was ready for anything. Jackson read, she purred, her voice carrying a hint of an accent Zara couldn't place. When you said you needed help with a family situation, I pictured something involving alimony payments, not harboring fugitives. Myra Voss, Jackson replied with obvious familiarity. Always a pleasure to see you too. Mira's eyes swept the apartment, taking in Zara and the sleeping children with calculating assessment. Beautiful family, she said, and there was something in her tone that made Zara's skin tingle with awareness. The children are adorable, and their mother, ... She let her gaze linger appreciatively on Zara's figure.
Oh.
Well, I can see why you're motivated to help. Zara felt heat rise in her cheeks, not just from embarrassment, but from something more complex. Myra's attention was like being examined by a predator, but not an unfriendly one. "Can you get them off the station?" Jackson asked, getting straight to business. "Off the station, off the planet, off the sector if necessary," Mira replied, settling into a chair with feline grace. "But it won't be cheap, and it won't be comfortable." "What's your price?" Zara asked, finding her voice. Mira's smile was enigmatic. "That depends. What can you offer?" The question hung in the air, with implications that made Zara's pulse quicken. She was acutely aware of both Jackson and Mira watching her of the way. Their presence filled the small space with a tension that was part danger, part desire. "I have some credits saved," Zara began, but Mira waved dismissively. "Credits are easy to trace, darling. I prefer alternative arrangements." Jackson stepped forward, his protective instincts clearly activated. "Mira, whatever you're thinking, relax, hero," Mira interrupted with amusement. "I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate, though I wouldn't say no to some quality time with both of you once this crisis is resolved." The casual way she said it, as if suggesting dinner rather than something far more intimate, made Zara's breath catch. She'd heard of humans and their fluid approach to relationships, but experiencing it firsthand was different. "What do you need?" Zara asked, surprised by her own boldness. "Information," Mira replied, her expression growing serious. "Your people, the Valdari. You have access to quantum harmonic technology that most species only dream about. That toy your daughter carries, for instance." All eyes turned to Nyx, who was just beginning to stir. The crystalline device in her small hands pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns. "It's just a comfort object," Zara said carefully. "That comfort object is attuned to her neural patterns and responds to emotional states," Mira observed. "The technology applications are staggering. Share the harmonic frequencies with me, and I'll get your family to safety." Zara hesitated. Valdari harmonic technology was closely guarded, considered sacred by her people, but watching her children sleep, knowing what awaited them if they were caught, made the choice clear. "Agreed," she said, "but only after we're safe." Mira's smile was brilliant. "I do love a woman who drives a hard bargain." The security patrol their planning session was interrupted by the urgent chime of Jackson's security system. Commander Thorne's image appeared on the communication screen, his granite features set in determination. "Captain Reed," Thorne's voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Station security shows you haven't reported for your scheduled compliance review. Additionally, there are reports of suspicious activity in your sector." Jackson kept his voice steady. "Just running some equipment diagnostics, Commander. You know how the civilian contractors like their privacy." "Indeed," Thorne replied, but his eyes were scanning what he could see of the apartment. "Nevertheless, I'm afraid I'll need to conduct a personal inspection." "Standard protocol." The transmission ended, and Mira was already moving. "Service tunnels?" she asked. "Compromised," Jackson replied tersely. "They'll have scanners watching every exit by now." Zara felt panic rising in her chest as the children woke, sensing the tension in the room. Nyx immediately moved to her side, while Echo rubbed his eyes sleepily. "Mama, what's happening?" Nyx whispered. "We have to play a game," Zara said, forcing calm into her voice. "A hiding game." Mira was examining the apartment's layout with professional interest. "Environmental systems," she mused. "Jackson, your quarters are on the outer ring, correct? That means direct access to the atmospheric processors." "The radiation levels," Jackson began, "will be manageable for short exposure," Mira finished. Long enough for Thorne to complete his search and move on. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Jackson moved quickly, opening an access panel that led to the station's life support systems. The space beyond was cramped and filled with humming machinery. "I'll stay," Zara said suddenly. "Hide the children, but I'll face Thorne alone. He's looking for a family, not a single woman." "Absolutely not," Jackson protested. "We stay together." "He's right," Mira added, though her tone was gentler than usual. "Separation is how they win." The entry chime sounded, followed by Thorne's authoritative voice demanding admission. There was no more time for debate. They squeezed into the maintenance space, Mira leading the way with confident movements that suggested she'd navigated similar escapes before. The space was dark and cramped, filled with the constant hum of machinery. Zara found herself pressed between Jackson and Mira, their body heat warming the small space. The children stayed close, their breathing shallow with fear and excitement. Through the thin walls, they could hear Thorne's team conducting their search. Footsteps moved methodically through the apartment, and Zara held her breath each time they paused near the access panel. Biosigns are elevated in this sector, one of the searchers reported. Could be residual from recent occupation, or current. Occupation, Thorne replied grimly. Expand the search parameters. In the darkness, Mira's hand found Zara's arm, squeezing gently in reassurance. The touch was warm and comforting, and Zara was surprised by how natural it felt. On her other side, Jackson's presence was solid and protective, his body positioned to shield her and the children from any threat. The moment stretched endlessly until finally, the sounds of search began to fade. Thorne's voice echoed once more through the apartment. Sector 7 Alpha clear. Moving to adjacent quarters. They waited another 10 minutes before emerging from their hiding place. The apartment looked exactly as they'd left it, but somehow felt violated by the intrusion. That was too close, Jackson muttered, running a hand through his hair. It's only going to get worse, Mira observed. Thorne's no fool. He knows you're involved, and he'll be watching. Zara looked at her children, who were clinging to each other with wide eyes. The game was over, and they knew it. The fear in their faces broke her heart. Then we leave now, she decided. Whatever the risk. The growing bond as they prepared for their escape. Zara found herself watching the easy cooperation between Jackson and Mira. They moved around each other with the fluid coordination of people who had worked together before, anticipating each other's needs and movements. How long have you known each other? She asked, during a quiet moment. 3 years, Mira replied, checking the power cells on a portable scanner. We met during the Arcturus incident. Jackson needed someone with flexible moral standards, and I needed someone who could fix anything that broke. It was a little more complicated than that, Jackson added with a smile. Mira saved my life by stealing a medical transport. I returned the favor by getting her ship's engines running when half the sector was hunting her. And now? Zara asked, though she wasn't sure what answer she wanted. Now we're friends, Mira said, but her eyes held warmth that suggested something. Deeper, very close friends. The implications hung in the air between them. Zara had heard that humans sometimes formed complex relationship bonds, partnerships that went beyond traditional pair bonding. The idea was both fascinating and intimidating. Does that bother you? Jackson asked quietly, studying her face. Zara considered the question honestly. I don't know, she admitted. My people are more traditional in our bonding practices. But nothing about my life has been traditional lately. Traditions can be beautiful, Myra said, approaching them with graceful steps. But they can also be limiting. Sometimes the most beautiful things happen when we let ourselves explore new possibilities. She was standing close now, close enough that Zara could smell her perfume, something warm and spicy that made her pulse quicken. Mira's hand touched her arm, a light contact that somehow conveyed volumes. I would never pressure you, Mira continued. Softly, but I want you to know that you're safe with us. Both of us. Zara looked between them, these two extraordinary humans who had risked everything to help her family. Jackson's steady strength and Mira's dangerous allure created a combination that was intoxicating. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that included not just survival, but happiness. Right now, she said carefully, I need to focus on my children's safety. But after, Jackson agreed, his voice rough with emotion. The moment was interrupted by Echo tugging on Zara's jacket. Mama, I'm hungry. The simple request broke the tension, reminding them all of their priorities. But as they gathered their few possessions and prepared to leave everything familiar behind, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The possibility of belonging somewhere again. The escape route Mira had planned would take them through the station's industrial section. Then, to her ship docked in the outer bay. It was dangerous, with multiple security checkpoints and patrol schedules to avoid.
I'll stay close.
Mira instructed as they approached the first checkpoint.
If anyone asks.
Your new crew members joining my ship for a routine cargo run. The deception worked, helped by Mira's confident demeanor and the official-looking documentation she'd somehow produced. But Zara could feel the weight of suspicious stares, the growing certainty that their luck couldn't hold forever as they neared the docking bay. Alarms began to sound throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in harsh red, and announcement systems crackled to life. Security alert. All residents return to quarters immediately. Unauthorized personnel will be detained, Thorne Jackson muttered grimly. He's figured it out. Through the bay windows they could see Mira's ship, a sleek vessel that looked fast and well-armed. But between them and freedom stood a squad of security officers, their weapons drawn and ready. Any brilliant ideas? Mira asked, though her hand was already moving to the weapon at her hip. Zara looked at her children, then at the two humans who had become her unexpected allies. The choice was simple, even if the execution would be anything but. We fight, she said simply, for freedom, for family, for the chance to find out what comes after. The final confrontation was about to begin. The battle for freedom. The docking. Bay stretched before them like an arena. Its vast space filled with ships of various sizes and the mechanical arms used for loading cargo. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh relief, creating deep shadows that could hide allies or enemies. The security squad blocking their path to Myra's ship stood in formation, their weapons trained on the bay entrance. Unauthorized personnel. Surrender immediately, Commander Thorne's voice echoed from the squad leader's communication device. You are in violation of multiple station ordinances. Mira's hand rested on her weapon, but she made no move to draw it. Instead, she studied the tactical situation with professional interest. 12 officers, standard energy weapons, decent cover positions. They're not taking any chances. Can we go around them? Zara asked, keeping her voice low, while positioning herself protectively in front of Nix and Echo. Not without being seen, Jackson replied, checking his engineering scanner.
What?
But the bay's loading systems are on the same power grid as the atmospheric processors. If I could create a distraction. Too risky, Myra interrupted. Those processors explode and we all become space dust. That's when Nix stepped forward, her crystalline toy pulsing brighter in her small hands. Mama, she said in her musical voice, the singing stone wants to help. Zara knelt beside her daughter, studying the artifact with new understanding. Faldari harmonic technology didn't just respond to emotions. It could amplify and project them. In the right circumstances, it could create effects that seemed almost magical to other species. The resonance frequency, she whispered, pieces falling into place. If we can match the station's structural harmonics, you want to sing the station? A part? Mira asked, incredulous. Not a part, Zara corrected, taking the crystal from Nix. Just enough to create confusion. Faldari harmonic manipulation can interfere with electronic systems, cause temporary disorientation in most humanoid species. Jackson's eyes lit up with understanding. Localized electromagnetic pulse, but organic instead of technological. Brilliant. Security squad was advancing now, their formation tight and professional. They had perhaps 30 seconds before they'd be in weapons range. Do it, Mira decided. Whatever you're going to do it now. Zara closed her eyes and began to hum, a low melodic sound that seemed to come from deep within her chest. The crystal, in her hands, responded immediately, its light intensifying until it was almost too bright to look at directly. The humming grew stronger, harmonics building upon themselves in complex patterns that seemed to bypass conscious thought and speak directly to the nervous system. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The security officers stumbled, their formation breaking as they struggled with sudden vertigo. Weapon targeting systems flickered and died, their electronic components overwhelmed by the harmonic interference. Even the bay's lighting systems began to pulse in rhythm with Zara's song. Move, Jackson shouted, taking point as they sprinted. Across the bay, they ran through the chaos, Myra covering their retreat, while Jackson led them toward her ship. The vessel was a beauty, all sleek lines and hidden weapon systems, with engines that promised speed and power. The boarding ramp was already lowering as they approached, but Commander Thorne wasn't finished with them yet. The commander's last stand, stop where you are. Thorne's voice boomed across the bay as he emerged from behind a cargo container, his sidearm drawn and trained on Jackson. I don't know what kind of alien witchcraft that was, but it's over now. The harmonic interference was fading, and Zara could feel the crystal's energy depleting. Around them, security officers were beginning to recover, shaking their heads and reaching for their weapons. Commander Jackson said, raising his hands but keeping himself between Thorne and the family. These people haven't committed any crime except wanting to stay together. They've violated immigration protocols, Thorne replied, his weapon steady. And you've aided and abetted fugitives. Stand down, Captain. Don't make this worse than it already is. Mira had circled around during the confusion, and Zara could see her moving into position behind Thorne. The commander was too experienced to be caught off guard so easily. Without turning, he called out, Ms. Voss, I suggest you reconsider. Whatever you're planning, my men have orders to shoot to kill if I'm threatened. Your men are still seeing double from our friend's little performance, Mira replied, though she stopped moving. But you make a fair point. The standoff stretched taut between them. Zara could feel her children pressed against her legs, trembling with fear and exhaustion. Nyx's crystal had gone dark, its energy spent, and Echo was so tired he could barely Stand, please, Zara said, stepping forward despite Jackson's protective gesture. We just want to leave. We're not a threat to anyone. Thorne's eyes fixed on her, and she saw something flicker in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. Or memory. You remind me of someone, he said quietly. My daughter. She married outside her species, had children the government decided weren't quite human enough. The admission hung in the air between them, and Zara saw the pain in the commander's eyes. What happened to them? She asked gently. They were processed, Thorne replied, his voice hollow, separated for evaluation. I never saw my grandchildren again. The weapon in his hand wavered slightly, and Zara took another step forward. Then you know what this means to them. What it means to me. For a moment it seemed like Thorne might lower his weapon, but duty and years of conditioning proved stronger than personal pain. I have my orders, he said, straightening his arm. I'm sorry. So an echo surprised them all. The boy had been silent throughout most of their adventure. Overwhelmed by events he was too young to fully understand. But now he stepped out from behind his mother, walking directly toward the commander with the fearless curiosity of childhood. Why are you sad? He asked in his clear young voice. Thorne stared down at the boy, his weapon suddenly seeming enormous and threatening in the face of such innocent trust. Not sad, son. I'm doing my job. But your eyes are leaking, Echo observed, pointing at the tears Thorne hadn't realized were falling. Mama's eyes leak when she's sad, too. The simplicity of childhood perception cut through years of military training and bureaucratic indoctrination. Thorne's weapon hand began to shake, and he looked around the bay as if seeing it clearly for the first time. Go, he said suddenly, holstering his sidearm. Get to your ship and go. I'll tell them you overpowered me. Commander, one of his officers protested, finally recovering enough to be coherent. I said they overpowered me, Thorne repeated, his voice carrying the authority of command. Are you questioning my assessment, Lieutenant? The officer fell. Silent confusion evident on his face. Thorne knelt down to Echo's level, reaching into his pocket to pull out a small metal pin. This was my daughter's, he said, pressing it into the boy's hand. Take care of your family, son. The ship of dreams Mira's. Ship, the Starlight Serenade, lifted off with the smooth power of perfectly tuned engines. As they cleared the station's gravitational field and jumped to hyperspace, Zara felt a weight she'd carried for years finally lifting from her shoulders. The ship's interior was more luxurious than she'd expected. All curved surfaces and warm. Lighting that created an atmosphere of comfort and sensuality. Mira had given them the guest quarters, a spacious cabin with real windows showing the star-streaked void of hyperspace. How long until we reach the sanctuary world? Zara asked, as Myra programmed their destination. 48 hours, Myra replied. her fingers dancing over the control console. Plenty of time to get to know each other better. The children had claimed the cabin's sitting area, Nix carefully tending to her depleted crystal while Echo examined Commander Thorne's pin with fascination. They seemed remarkably resilient, adapting to their new circumstances with the flexibility of youth. "They're amazing," Jackson observed, watching them play. "After everything they've been through, they're still just kids." "Children are stronger than adults give them credit for," Zara replied. "They adapt because they trust that their parents will keep them safe." She was standing at the cabin's window, watching the cosmic light show of hyperspace travel. Close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "And what about their mother?" he asked softly. "How is she adapting?" Zara considered the question honestly.
Us.
"She's terrified," she admitted. Not of the danger, but of hoping for too much. Of believing that she might actually get to be happy. Happiness isn't something you earn, Jackson said, his hand finding hers. It's something you choose every day. His touch sent warmth spreading through her body, and she turned to face him fully. In the ethereal light of hyperspace, he looked like something from a dream, strong and gentle and impossibly attractive. "Is that what you're choosing?" she asked. "Happiness." "I'm choosing you," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "If you'll have me." The kiss was inevitable. Gravity and magnetism, and the simple need to connect with another soul. Jackson's lips were warm and gentle, asking rather than demanding, and Zara found herself melting into his embrace. It had been so long since she'd felt desired, valued for more than her maternal instincts. They might have lost themselves completely in that moment. But the cabin door chimed softly. Mira entered, carrying a tray of refreshments, her smile knowing and amused. "Don't stop on my account," she said, setting the tray down gracefully. "I was rather enjoying the show." Zara felt heat flood her cheeks, but Mira's presence didn't feel intrusive. Instead, it added another layer of complexity to the emotions swirling through the cabin. "Join us," Jackson said simply, his arm still around Zara's waist. Myra's eyebrows rose elegantly. "Are you sure? This is all very new for our beautiful Valdari friend." Zara looked between them, these two extraordinary humans who had risked everything for her family. The traditional part of her mind whispered warnings about propriety and social conventions. But a stronger voice, one that spoke of loneliness and desire and the simple human need for connection, urged her to be brave. "Yes," she said, surprised by her own boldness, "I'm sure." The new beginning, the sanctuary world of Haven's Grace, lived up to its name. Rolling hills covered in silver grass stretched to purple mountains under a sky that shifted between gold and lavender as its twin suns moved through their daily dance. The settlement that welcomed refugees was small, but thriving. Built with the kind of organic architecture that seemed to grow from the landscape itself. Zara stood on the porch of their new home, watching Nix and Echo play in the garden with children of a dozen different species. Her crystal had regained its glow in the planet's unique electromagnetic field, and Echo wore Thorne's pin proudly on his shirt. They were healing, growing, becoming part of something larger than their small family. "Penny." "For your thoughts," Jackson said, joining her with 2 cups of real coffee. "Just thinking about how much has changed," she replied, accepting the warm cup gratefully. "A month ago, I thought my life was over. Now, ... And now you're part of something beautiful," Myra said, emerging from the house with her own cup and settling into the porch swing. She'd decided to stay on Haven's Grace, at least for a while, claiming that the planet's quantum fields were perfect for her research. Into Faldari harmonic technology, the 3 of them had navigated their unconventional relationship with surprising ease. Myra's worldly experience and Jackson's steady presence complemented each other perfectly, and Zara found that her heart was large enough to encompass them both. They were building something new together, a family that transcended traditional boundaries. "The children seem happy," Zara observed, watching Nix teach a young Terran boy how to make her crystal sing. "They're resilient," Jackson agreed. Like their mother, comfortable silence settled over them, broken only by the sound of children's laughter and the gentle whisper of alien wind through silver grass. On Haven's Grace, no one questioned a woman with violet skin raising human hybrid children, or the unusual family structure that had evolved among the three adults who loved them. "I have news," Mira announced suddenly, producing a data pad from her jacket. "I've been in contact with some of my old associates. It seems our escape from Helix Station has inspired other families in similar situations. There's talk of organizing a formal refugee assistance network." "Using your ship?" Jackson asked. "Using several ships," Mira corrected with a grin. "Apparently there are more people out there with flexible moral standards and fast ships than the authorities realized." Zara felt a warm glow of satisfaction at the thought of other families finding the safety and freedom her children now enjoyed. "What would you need from us?" "Mnemonic technology," Mira replied. "Our people's gifts could revolutionize how we disable security systems and create escape opportunities. It's not meant to be used as a weapon," Zara said carefully. "And not as a weapon," Mira agreed. "As a tool of liberation, there's a difference." Zara considered the proposal while watching her children play. They were laughing now, their trauma healing in the safety of acceptance and love. How many other children were still trapped in systems that saw them as problems to be solved rather than lives to be cherished? "I'll need to consult with the elders of my people," she said finally. "But if they agree, I'll help you." "We'll help you," Jackson corrected, his hand finding hers. "We're in this together now." The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. In the distance, the settlement's evening bells began to chime, calling families home for dinner. Nix and Echo came running up the path, their faces flushed with exercise and joy. "Mama, can we stay here forever?" Nix asked, climbing into Zara's lap. "As long as you want, little star," Zara replied, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "This is our home now." Echo settled against Jackson's side, already drowsy from the day's adventures. The pin on his shirt caught the last rays of sunlight. And Zara thought about Commander Thorne and the choice he'd made to let love triumph over duty. "Will you tell us a story?" Echo mumbled sleepily. "What kind of story?" Mira asked, moving to sit on the porch railing where she could see all of them. "A true one," Nick said seriously. "About brave people in love and finding home." Zara looked around at her unconventional family, at the alien world that had welcomed them, at the future, spreading out before them full of possibility and hope. "Once upon a time," she began, her voice carrying the musical quality of her people, "there was a mother who thought her story was ending. But it turned out she was just at the beginning of the most beautiful chapter of all." The story continued as the stars emerged in Haven's Grace's spectacular night sky. A tale of courage and love and the infinite possibilities that opened when hearts dared to be brave. And somewhere in the galaxy, other families looked up at those same stars and dreamed of their own new beginnings. The end.